Well, good morning, Colonial. How you guys doing? My name's Ben, and today is my last day as the interim teaching pastor of Colonial Church. So, thanks for not for the boo, but for y'all. I've loved being with you guys for the last few months. Thank you so much for the hospitality, for the warm welcome. It's been awesome. What I want to show you today is not original content that I came up with. It's something that 10 years ago made a massive difference in my life, and it's from a guy named Andy Stanley in Atlanta, Georgia. Just want to give that shameless disclaimer before we go any further, and it's incredible. If you do something with this instead of nothing, your life will be drastically different a decade from now. When I was a kid, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid growing up in middle Georgia, like I grew up in the sticks, Georgia, and there was I don't know how many acres of wooded area behind our house, but it's kind of the big bunch of woods and creek that separated our neighborhood from the next neighborhood, and we had, fording the river and cutting down trees to cross the creek and building forts, and I lived in those woods. I was there every day, and especially during the summer, like this time of year, if you wanted to find me, I was out there building a fort somewhere next to the creek, right? Like awesome place to play and grow up as a kid. And I remember this one day, like it was yesterday, maybe this has happened to you too. I came out of the woods, I've come off of, who knows, I lost track of time while I was out in the woods, right? And I walk up to my backyard and into my driveway, and there's my father with a look that could kill. And I immediately knew I had done something wrong, right? You ever had that moment where you crossed the line, you didn't even know it, but you were in trouble? And in that moment, I learned a valuable lesson, probably because of the spanking that I received, but I learned a valuable lesson. I need to change my behavior. Never go into the woods without telling mom and dad where you're going. Like I learned a lesson that day, and I modified my behavior moving forward based on the strength and the severity of that lesson, right? We do this all the time. We learn to monitor and modify our behavior. And you learned it so well as a kid that even into adulthood, you're still an expert at monitoring and modifying your behavior. You want to know why? Because you graduated high school and you went to college and you pledged in a fraternity or a sorority, and the first day that you're sitting there, they said, here's how we do it here. And you wanted to fit in, so you modified the way you do it so that they would accept you, right? Or then you graduated college and you got your first full-time job. Anybody remember that? You were getting paid peanuts and you thought it was, an infinite wealth of resources. And your employer sat across the table from you on day one and said, here's how we do it round here. And you modified your behavior so the paycheck kept coming. Like, we do this really, really well. The problem is, along the way, nobody ever taught you how to monitor and modify your heart. And so that day came where you had been really, really good at modifying your behavior, and on the outside, you're a good, upstanding, law-abiding citizen, and then something came out, and you're like, I have no idea where that came from, right? Like, that's not me, and everybody around you is like, yeah, it is, big boy. We know exactly where it came from. It's that thing on the front of your face that just does this uncontrollably, right? Like, but it's not who I want to be, and yet I don't know where it came from. That's what I want to talk about this morning as we close this series. This is our 5th episode and final episode in Guardrails. And if you haven't been here with us, a guardrail is a system designed to keep your vehicle from straying into dangerous or off-limit areas on the road. Right? This isn't news to most of us. We see them every day when we drive. They aren't built in the danger zone. They're built in the what? Awesome. 5 of you have been paying attention for the last month. I'm so encouraged. They're not built in the danger zone. If the guardrail was built in the danger zone, it doesn't do any good, does it? So we gladly give up some safe driving space so the guardrail can exist before we get to the danger zone. And because they're built in the safety zone, they do 2 things for us on the road. They direct us and protect us. They direct us and protect us. They show us, here's the direction that you need to go on the road. And in case your vehicle is drifting too far, it will protect you. And it seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Right? Because if you slam into a guardrail, it doesn't sound much like protection, does it? But you and I both know that if my vehicle's drifting further than I intended and I hit a guardrail, it protects me from the danger that's beyond the guardrail. Now, the point of this series is that the road is not the only place that we need guardrails. In fact, for this series, we've said a guardrail is a personal standard of behavior that becomes a matter of conscience. Here's the deal. I can't stand here and tell you what your guardrails need to be. And I thank God that you can't sit there and tell me what they're supposed to be for me. This isn't law, it's a personal standard. It's you and me looking in the mirror and looking at our culture and assessing our life and saying, for me, this far and no further. Danger, danger on the other side of this behavior. So I'm going to set a personal standard of conscience that when I hit this point, I want my conscience to light up. I want to feel uncomfortable early so that I never, ever get to the danger zone of life. That's a guardrail. And so today, I want to talk about guardrails for your heart. Guardrails for your heart. Solomon is the wisest man that ever lived and the wisest man that ever wrote. That's what Jesus said, so I'm going to take his word for it. Jesus said Solomon's the wisest man on earth ever in all of history. And Solomon wrote a lot of stuff. Solomon wrote the Song of Solomon, which if you're not married, don't read it. It'll awaken love before it's time. If you're wondering about whether this life is all that there is, go read Ecclesiastes. It says, no, there's actually a life beyond this one, that what's under the sun isn't all that there is. And then most of the book of Proverbs, Solomon wrote these wise pieces of advice and practical application for life. And Solomon said in Proverbs chapter 4, above all else. In other words, this is the wisest man of all time, wisest man who ever wrote, and he's saying, above everything else that I've written, above everything else that I've taught you, above all else that you could read on my thoughts on the matter, above all of that, guard your heart. Wisest man of all time, saying this is the most important thing that you could ever understand about life. Guard your heart. Why? Why do I need to guard my heart? What's the problem with my heart? Well, here's the deal. Everything you do flows out of your heart. This is what Solomon's teaching us. I just want you to push the pause button on your mental rabbit trail for just a minute and ask, what if that was true? What if it was true that the most dangerous areas of my life are actually on the inside? That the danger zones that I keep stumbling into and veering into off the road are inside, not outside. Suddenly it's not my employer's fault for my life circumstances. Suddenly it's not my spouse or my former spouse's fault for my life. Suddenly my kids aren't really the problem. Something is in me that creates danger zones. That's what Solomon's saying. What if this was true? Wouldn't you want to know how to make it right? And so Jesus, 1,000 years after Solomon said this, Jesus comes on the scene. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about Jesus because word on the street is not everybody likes him, okay? Even in our day. His day, it was the same thing. But the people who didn't like Jesus were actually the ones with religious power. Okay, so Jesus had the most arguments of his earthly life with religious leaders who were jealous and envious of his power, influence, and authority. Now, the crowd, us normal people, they liked Jesus. Just stop and think about this for a minute. People who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. That maybe for you, you're here and you're exploring Christianity and you're exploring church and Jesus. I've got good news for you. I think if Jesus were here, he would like you. And you would like him. You'd sit and you'd listen to him teach and you'd say, dude's the smartest man I've ever heard. I don't understand more than half of what he says, but I'm drawn towards him. And the things I do understand make me really uncomfortable, but for some strange reason, I want to hear more. That doesn't make any sense. If Jesus were here, he would like you, and you would like him, unless you coveted his power, influence, and authority. And then you were going to try to kill him. And that's what they did eventually. And so one day, I want to show you that this interchanged between Jesus and the religious leaders and the crowd and his disciples. It's fascinating. If you don't read the New Testament, you really need to, because there's just some fantastic stuff in there, okay? So Jesus is always surrounded by this crowd of people who love him and want to hear more and want to get to know him because they like him and he likes them. But always on the fringes of that crowd were the religious leaders, trying to figure out how to subvert his authority with the crowd, trying to figure out how to trap him in a question that would cause him to lose credibility with them. And this one day, the religious leaders evidently pushed through the crowd to the middle of the circle, and they got a question for Jesus. And here's what it is. Religious leaders say to Jesus, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Now, maybe you're confused right off the bat. You're like, that doesn't make any sense to me. My mama taught me to wash my hands before I eat. Didn't your mama teach you to wash your hands before you eat? Jesus' disciples aren't washing their hands before they eat. That's just gross. I'd have the same question, right? That's not what's going on here, okay? The elders of Israel, the leaders of Israel, the religious leaders, had taken the law of God, the law of Moses, and they had built guardrails around it. Not as a personal standard of behavior as a matter of conscience. They had built guardrails around the law so that they wouldn't have to obey God's law. And one of God's laws, here's what's going on here. I just want to make sure you're on the same page with what's happening. One of God's laws is related to things that are unclean. And so God made laws for all the chief priests, the high priests, and the temple priests who had to touch the sacrifices and touch the temple furniture and touch all the things of God. Those select few needed to ceremonially wash themselves and their hands before they did the religious service of worship. That was part of the law. It didn't apply to everybody. It only applied to the religious leaders. And so these religious leaders, over time, made guardrails or traditions around that law, and they were personal traditions, personal standards that everyone must wash. If the religious leaders have to wash before we do these things, then everyone should wash before we do these things. And they enforced their personal guardrails on everyone. It became tradition. That's what's happening here. So the elders, the religious leaders, are upset with Jesus' disciples because Jesus' disciples aren't obeying their guardrails. And Jesus gets furious with them. This is pretty fantastic. So Jesus, being the master teacher that he is, just turns it upside down on them. He says, "And why do you, the leaders, break the commandments of God for the sake of your traditions?" In other words, you're more dedicated to obeying your guardrails than you are to obeying the law of God. Why is that? Could you imagine those religious leaders all of a sudden it's like, awkward. And they start like, who asked the question? You're fired. You never get to talk to Jesus again. Like, we had him, man. Like, why'd you blow it? Jesus is furious with them. He's like, listen, guys, you actually break God's law because you don't want to obey it, and then you expect everyone else to follow your rules and your traditions. Why do you do that? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Jesus is like, well, fine, I'll illustrate it for you. God said, Jesus just pulled the trump card. God said, honor your father and mother. Anybody ever heard of that one? That's like number 4 in the Big Ten. I mean, this is like the table of contents for the Jewish law, okay? Everybody who's asking Jesus this question knows this one. Like, here's what God said. God said you should honor your father and mother. But you say, this is where your tradition comes in, that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is devoted to God, they must not honor their father and mother with it. Crickets. Like, I don't know what to say. Now, let me illustrate this for you so you understand what's happening. Let's imagine that there's a teenage girl, and she's speaking disrespectfully to her mother. Never happens, I know, it's a stretch. And her father comes in and has a come to Jesus meeting and says, listen, you will not speak disrespectfully to your mother. And the girl says, you know what? I remember Ben teaching on guardrails a couple weeks ago. I think I'm going to put a guardrail up. And Dad's like, that's a win? This is amazing. My daughter's listening in church. That's fantastic. Here's my guardrail, Dad. You tell me not to speak disrespectfully to Mom. I'm not going to speak to her at all. And dad says, that is disrespectful. You see, the daughter doesn't want to respect mom anyway, so she puts a tradition in place that prevents her from actually obeying the rule, which she doesn't want to obey anyway. Do you track with that? All the fathers of teenage daughters tracked with it. It's exactly what the religious leaders had done. We don't want to honor our father and mother anyway, so what they did was created a tradition. They created a guardrail, and here was their guardrail. They said, if you declare all of your assets as belonging to God and you devote them to the temple, then they no longer belong to you. But as long as you're living, you can use those assets for your immediate family. But as soon as you die, all those assets go to the temple, to the treasury. They belong to God. And so aging parents would come to their adult children needing help. And their son would say, oh, Dad, man, that really breaks our heart. It just rips my heart out. But you see, I devoted all my stuff to God, so I can't do anything for you. Sorry. I'm taking care of your grandkids with our stuff, but I can't help you. Jesus says, thus you nullify the word or the command of God for the sake of your stupid tradition. I inserted the word stupid just to make sure we're clear there. You guys are breaking God's law because you don't want to obey it. And you're trusting in your tradition instead of in his word. You hypocrites. Now that's just Jesus' way of ending the conversation, like mic drop. And the religious leaders probably, I imagine, based on what comes next, they just kind of shrink back away from Jesus and disappear into the crowd. Now, the crowd, meanwhile, is standing there jaw-dropped, like Jesus just owned them. I don't understand anything about what he just said, but they clearly lost the debate, okay? So Jesus, wanting to make sure the crowd understood what just took place, says, hey guys, come here. He called the crowd to himself, and he said, listen and understand. I want you to understand. What goes into someone's mouth is not what defiles them. Defile is one of those big religious sin kind of words. Defile means to upset God. You want to know what upsets God? What upsets God isn't that you eat pork. That's not what upsets him. What upsets him is that what comes out of you hurts other people. That makes your Heavenly Father upset. This is brand new understanding for them. Some of us understand this. Maybe you grew up in a church and they didn't teach this, and you wish you had grown up in a church that taught this, that what comes out of you is actually what makes God upset with you. Jesus is the hinge between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. He's the pivot between the Old Testament and the New Testament. He's saying, guys, I haven't come to cast aside the law of Moses and the law of God. I've actually come to completely fulfill it in your place because you can't. You see, you've got a heart problem. You're never going to be able to fulfill the law of God. You're never going to be able to fully obey it and fulfill it. So I've come to do that. And here's what God has always wanted. He's always wanted your heart. But your heart is the problem. It needs renewal. It needs rebirth. It needs regeneration, rejuvenation from the inside. It's something you can't even do for yourself. But from your heart is where your enmity, your opposition to God comes from. And I've come to solve that problem. But I need you to understand, it's not what goes in that puts you at odds with God. It's what comes out that puts you at odds with God. What goes into someone's mouth is not what defiles them, but what comes out of their mouth. This is what defiles them. This is brand new understanding for them. And so I imagine, based on what comes next, that the crowd kind of walks away scratching their head, and they're like, you're going to have to illustrate that for a couple more decades before I get it. And they walk away. And then I'm going to insert some more words in your Bible just for a second. Peter, I imagine, because Peter's the thick one. He comes up to Jesus and he's like, Jesus, listen, I understood everything you just said. But the other guys, they're kind of struggling with it a little bit. So could you explain it to them? Not to me. I'm with you. I'm tracking. But just to get us all on the same page, could you go over that one more time? The next thing that happens in the passage, Jesus goes, are you still so dull? I'm telling you, you got to read the New Testament. This is fascinating stuff, right? Are you still so dumb? Like, are you just not bright enough? I just went over it with the people. Okay, listen. I'm going to go real slow, all right? I'm going to slow this way down. Just track with me. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach? We're on the same page? Yes, Jesus, we understand this. I'm just making sure. Like, you're the ones that asked me to slow it down for you. What goes into the mouth enters the stomach and then goes out of the body. We know that they're like, oh, Jesus, it's a little embarrassing. Like, why are we talking about this? It's like, you asked. Just making sure we're on the same page. What goes in the mouth, into the stomach, out of the body. Clear? But the things that come out of a person's mouth, these come from the heart. You with me? It's not what goes in that defiles you. It's what comes out. The things that come out, these defile you. For out of the heart come evil thoughts. And look at what he includes next as evil thoughts. Murder, that's an action. Adultery, that's an activity. Sexual immorality, that's a whole category of activity. Theft, false testimony, and slander, legal or illegal activities. Jesus says what comes out of your heart, the thoughts, the meditations, the desires, the intentions of your heart come out. And when they come out, it creates a danger zone where you get hurt and you end up hurting the people around you. That's what upsets your Heavenly Father. These are what defile a person. Do you understand? But, just so we're clear, but eating with unwashed hands, that's not what defiles you. This is brand new for them. Brand new. It's always been about an upward, vertical, right relationship with God. And Jesus is taking that purely upward. Is God happy? Is God happy? Is God happy? I don't care about you. I want to make sure God's happy. And he's saying, no. It's always been God is unhappy because you are hurting other people because you have no guardrails on your heart. Now, what Jesus is trying to teach them is that our behavior will eventually mirror our hearts. Our behavior will eventually mirror what's in my heart. Another way to say it is what's always been in my heart will eventually come out in how I treat you and others. This is always true. And so I've got 3 kids right now, and the middle one is giving me a run for my money. And I've told you this before, not much has changed. God's still working on my guardrails. He does stuff that just makes me angry. And I end up saying that out loud. I'm like, you make me so angry. And then I walk away. I'm like, it's not true. That anger was in there. Now, you helped bring it out, but it's not your fault. I've got to go do some heart work because I just found anger in me, and it came out against you. It's always been in my heart. It just finally made its way into my speech and into my actions. Now, because this is true, I want to spend the rest of our time together this morning and summarizing, wrapping up this series, talking about guardrails for your heart. What are some guardrails we could put in place for our heart? Because if this is true, and if above all else I need to guard my heart, what am I guarding? What am I guarding against? What am I protecting myself from? And what am I directing myself towards on the road with guardrails specifically for my heart? And here's 4 what I call big, strong emotions that live inside our hearts. Guilt, anger, greed, and jealousy. And these enemies are in my heart, wreaking havoc in my life. And unless I give them some direction, and unless I protect me and others from them, I'm going to create danger zones in these 4 areas. So watch this. I love Andy's way of making this simple and understandable. Guilt says, I owe you. I owe you. I owe you something. I either took something and you don't know it yet, or I did something, and when it finally comes into public knowledge, it's going to hurt you. I'm creating a danger zone because of something I did or didn't do, and I feel guilty because I know it and you don't. And so it's beginning to wreak havoc in my life. I owe you. Some of you, your marriages are struggling in this area because your spouse is asking you, you seem a little off, what's wrong? And you're like, oh, nothing's wrong, nothing. And they're smart, they know better, they know you're lying to them. And it's like, no, really, what's wrong? Oh, nothing's wrong. And they say, how long are you going to do this? For the rest of our marriage. Because if you knew what I know, it would destroy our relationship. And so I'm going to play these games, and I'm going to hide, and I'm going to keep secrets, and I'm going to dodge your questions, all while trying to keep myself safe. And what you're actually doing, you're allowing a danger zone to exist in your life. Guilt, I owe you. Anger says you owe me. This one's a fun one, isn't it? Like, don't you just love being angry? Doesn't it feel good, right? This is not good, right? It's real bad. It's real bad. Anger is you owe me, and I hold the power when I remind you of what you did. I'm going to make you pay. That's anger. When anger grows in my heart, it comes out in lots of really dangerous ways. It leaks. Have you noticed this? Anger leaks. It's never isolated to the relationship of origin. Anger is never isolated to the relationship of origin. It always starts somewhere small. But then over time, if it's unresolved, if it's never taken care of, it starts to creep into other relationships and destroy other people. You've probably heard it said, anger is the poison you drink thinking you're hurting someone else. Anger. It's got to be solved. Do you know anybody? Don't raise your hand and don't point at your neighbor if it's them. Do you know anybody who's burned a career down because anger in some small relationship began to metastasize and it eventually destroyed a relationship and a reputation? Eventually took a career. Do you know anybody who's burned a marriage to the ground because they were angry at their kids or their spouse, or maybe angry at the neighbor, and it eventually crept into the marriage and the family, and it crumbled under the weight of that danger zone? You've got to solve these things. You've got to have guardrails. Guilt, like we talked about last week. Guilt, I owe me. I know you're never going to give it to me, and it's my appetite that's insatiable, and I owe it to myself to go make it happen because I can't trust you to do it for me. That's greed. It's the assumption, you remember, that it's all for my consumption. One person was listening last week. I'm so encouraged. Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. It's all for me. It's about me. It's mine. And I owe it to myself. Have you ever told yourself this? She's not going to take care of it. He's not going to do it. No one's going to do it for me. I got to pull myself up by my bootstraps because if I don't do it, no one else will. Underneath that is greed and an insatiable appetite for more and more and more. Jealousy says life owes me. Life owes me. I get jealous when I look at what life has done for you. And I get jealous of your spouse because life didn't give me one that awesome. And I get jealous of your job because mine's puny and pathetic and not earning enough by comparison. And I grow jealous because life hasn't paid me what I feel like I'm worth or what I feel like is due. Life owes me. Anybody see yourself on the TV right now? Maybe you're like, I see myself in multiple categories. This is a terrible day to be at church. I think I'm going to sit here right now because it'd be really awkward to get up and leave after that, but I'm thinking of leaving. I'm just dwelling on, right? Like this is danger. If you look up here and you see yourself in even one of these, but definitely in multiple, you've got danger zones in your life and you desperately need guardrails to direct you towards safety and to protect you from greater harm in life. So I just want to give you 4 words that are the guardrail for each of these. And I just want to challenge you. Can you monitor your heart and identify one of these areas where you need to personalize one of these guardrails? So The only antidote for guilt is confession. If you've got a dirty secret, the only thing that's going to kill guilt in your heart is to get it out. It's a poisonous plant that's beginning to destroy the good soil of your heart, and you got to uproot it and let it die. And the only way to do that is to come clean. I know what you're thinking. You're like, dude, that scares me to death. I cannot imagine telling another human what I know that I did or didn't do. I can't imagine telling the person who needs to know it most. That would end our relationship. And if that's true, and it might actually be true, depending on what you've done or didn't do and what that relationship is, can I challenge you in this guardrail? Go tell someone who you don't know. Go find a person out on the street, 17 blocks from your house. You're never going to see this person again. And just say, listen, dude, I don't know you, and I just need 3 minutes of your time. You'll never see me again, I pray. And I got to tell somebody, here's my dirty secret. Good, glad I'm done. See you later, and leave. Like, that's step one. And I promise you, because it's happened to me. If you do that enough, with enough strangers and enough people who are nobodies, who are it's never going to impact their life, eventually, you'll get to a place where you feel the freedom to tell somebody who it does impact, who does matter. Confess, get it out. It's never as bad as you think it is. I promise. I've had people come in my office and they're like, dude, I've never told this to another human being. I'm like, all right, lay it on me. And they tell me, and I'm like, that's it? That's your deepest, darkest, dirtiest secret. Like, at this point in my life, I've heard it all. I'm not going to share it all with you right now. But I've heard it, and I look at them and I'm like, that's it? That's all you got? Didn't it feel good to get that out? You want to work on it together? Because I'm on your side and I'm for you, and I don't ever want you to go back into that mud hole. Like, can we take care of that together? Because I want to see you grow. I want to see you heal. That's what happens when you confess. Anger. You owe me, and the only way I'm ever going to be free of the power of anger is to forgive. Forgiveness, by definition, is releasing the debt that you hold. This is incredible. Our Savior modeled this for us. We owed him, and he was full of wrath, and yet he forgave. He canceled our debt. That's forgiveness. To do this, and this is the hard work. I'm just telling you, it's hard because it's hard work. You've got to name what was taken from you. And you've got to name who took it. And then you've got to your Heavenly Father first. Maybe you don't ever actually get to have this conversation face to face with that person who took something from you. But to your Heavenly Father, you've got to say, Father, I don't want this anger to create any more danger in my life. I want to be free of it, and so I release them from that. And you do it every day. You release them from the debt, and release them from the debt, and release them from the debt. And you know what happens to your heart? You are no longer in bondage to what they took from you. That's the irony of anger. The longer you hold that debt, the more bondage your heart is in to what they took. So can I just encourage you, challenge you? Maybe you need to sit long enough to say, it was him, and he took my innocence and my virginity. I hate him for it. But I'm going to release him from that debt because he can't even ever give it back. Why am I holding on to this? I'm the one who's enslaved by this. And can I challenge you to just release him from the debt? Release him. Now, if it was something of criminal offense, call the sheriff. Like, I'm not telling you not to let justice do its thing and have its way. Like, please call the authorities if it's criminally offensible. But then after you hang up that phone and let them pursue justice, tell your Father in heaven that you don't want that anger to rule your heart anymore. And you release the debt. Greed. The only way to kill greed is to give. Here's the irony of greed. As long as your heart is full of greed, Even though your appetite is unsatisfied, your heart is full of greed, you have no room for anyone else in your heart. And that hurts the heart of God. That what he wants from us is for us to open up our hearts for others to have relationship with us and with him. And when we allow greed to live in our heart, it's crowding out the space that he designed for other people to occupy in our heart. That's the irony. I feel unsatisfied, but the truth is I've got no more space because I'm full and I can't help you. And the only antidote is to start giving away your stuff and your influence and your power. You got to give it away to make room in your heart for someone else and a relationship to grow there. You got to give. And it's going to hurt. You're going to write a check bigger than you ever thought you would. And it's going to hurt because you are clearing house and making room for your Heavenly Father and his agenda. You got to give. And then jealousy. The only way to kill jealousy, whether you believe life owes you something or God owes you something. And that's really the kicker, isn't it? I've been a faithful Christian, a follower of Jesus for years, and I don't feel like God is paying out what I've put in. You do understand that's not the gospel? That's not how this works, right? He already gave. He doesn't owe you a dime or anything or any power or any influence. And yet jealousy grows in your heart when you assume that he still owes you something for the time and the effort and the faith and the stuff that you've put in. And so the only way to kill jealousy, whether life or God owes you, is to begin to celebrate the accomplishments of others. Can I tell you how hard that one is? I have a friend named Mark. I'm not going to give you his last name so that you can't ever find him and identify who he is. And if you Google Mark and Ben, you'll probably get an ice cream shop somewhere, but you won't really be able to figure out who he is. Mark is his real name, Mark. Mark and I became students of Bible college as transfer students from other schools on the same day in 2002. We graduated from Bible college together on the same day of 2005, having spent a summer together in Kenya on a mission trip together, all summer. I knew Mark really well. We joined the staff of the same church on the same day of 2005. He was the high school pastor. I was the college pastor. Mark got promoted to full-time before me. That did hurt my heart just a little bit. I was a little jealous of Mark. Then Mark decided to move back to his home church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, December of 2010. That church was looking for a college pastor, and Mark's like, hey, why don't you talk to my friend Ben? So they did, and then they hired me. And 8 months later, I'm now the college pastor, and he's now the high school pastor at another church together, right? And so I've grown with Mark through the ranks of adulthood, from college all the way up until now. And Mark now is moving. He's actually moving to a church in Austin. It's a church that we have a partnership with, my church and their church does. And I couldn't be happier for Mark. Like, he's an awesome, awesome guy. But I got to be honest with you. I was jealous of Mark for years. For years. He looks better than me. I like women, okay? Don't hear me saying anything I'm not. He's a good-looking guy. He's got an awesome, beautiful family. Not that mine's atrocious, but, from the outside, everybody else's looks better, right? He's a better preacher and communicator than me. He's a better leader than me. He just, Mark's that guy that, not like me, when he walks in the room, he's like, everybody wants to talk to Mark. And I watched this for over a decade. It's like, hello, I'm over here. Okay, you don't want to talk to me, fine. Like, I was jealous of Mark for the better part of a decade. And it began to gnaw at me. Like, I would see Mark get promotions ahead of me and have more influence than me. He'd get to preach in big church before I ever got to preach there. Like, he'd be invited to the conference, and I'm still sitting at home. Like, I was jealous of Mark. And then I learned this principle, that the only way to kill jealousy is to celebrate the accomplishments of Mark. I gotta be honest with you. The only thing running in the back of my mind was kill Mark. That would solve the problem. Right? Like, if we just did away with Mark, my world would be a better place. Maybe somebody would miss him, but I wouldn't, right? Like, I'm jealous of what Mark has and who Mark is. Mark needs to die. That was the bottom line. I can take care of this problem. And then Andy taught me that the only way to kill jealousy, because get this, jealousy isn't a Mark problem. Jealousy is a Ben problem. Jealousy isn't growing in Mark's heart. Jealousy is growing in Ben's heart. And the more that I grow jealous of Mark, the bigger of a problem and the bigger of a danger zone I had. And I had to come to the place where I believed that celebrating Mark would eventually kill jealousy in Ben. And so I would stand in front of our college gathering. I got to preach every Tuesday to our college group, and I would celebrate Mark, our high school pastor. Hey guys, in 2 or 3 weeks, Mark's going to be here, and you might skip the next 2 weeks because it's just me, but 3 weeks from now, I want you to be here with your friends because Mark's going to preach, and I don't want you to miss it because he is the best communicator on our staff. I didn't believe it, but I had to celebrate Mark, and I put as much energy into it as I could, and evidently I was believable. You know what happened? Over time, the more I would celebrate Mark publicly, the more I would come to believe that he is a child of God, made in God's image, that God has given Mark gifts and talents and abilities. I have nothing to do with Ben. And the more I celebrate who God made Mark to be and what God has given Mark, jealousy began to shrivel and die in my heart. Fast forward to 4 months ago, true story. 4 months ago, my senior pastor, and I'm on staff at a church in Columbia, my senior pastor came to me and he said, hey, do you know Mark? He gave me his last name. I was like, yeah, I know him. Why? He said, well, we're thinking about hiring him for the job that you want. True story. Says, we just love to know your opinion of him and whether we should hire him. Suddenly, Ben had a problem. I could either tell the truth and celebrate Mark privately at this point, or I could let jealousy rear its ugly head again and protect myself. And I said, you know what, Jeff? I've known Mark for 16 years now. He's one of my best friends. Incredible leader, incredible communicator, incredible team builder. He's a great dad. I've babysat his kids. He's a fantastic husband. I went to school with his wife. I know their family. He's humble. He's teachable. We would not go wrong hiring him, and I would gladly sit under his teaching on a weekly basis from your pulpit. I can't speak highly enough about him. And I walked away from that conversation, and my Heavenly Father said, didn't that feel good? Because he knew that all of it was true, that it didn't take me any energy or effort to come out with that. And you've done the math already because I told you Mark just took a job in Austin. I got to keep my job. It was a great day. My Heavenly Father still loves me, and he knows what I need. And so I was able to celebrate Mark and watch jealousy die in my heart. Can I challenge you? Put some guardrails in your heart. Whichever one of these categories is yelling at you the loudest, can you personalize one of those guardrails today and say, for me, I'm going to choose fill in the blank. And when I hit that guardrail, I'm going to confess sooner than I would have and stay out of the danger zone. I'm going to release that debt now when I want to hold on to it a little bit longer because I don't want danger to grow in my heart. I'm going to give. I'm going to walk up to a complete stranger and hand them more cash than I probably should just because I will not let greed rule my heart. And I don't like her, and she's atrocious, but I'm going to celebrate her to our friend group, not for her sake. My Father in heaven knows what's really true going on there, but in me there's a jealousy, and it will not take my heart down. Can you put a guardrail in place today? Because Solomon said, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Can you monitor and modify your heart? Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that you have already done the hardest work here. You have rescued our hearts from the depths of our sin. Would you continue to do your work? Would you do in us your freeing work as you teach us how to release these enemies that are in our heart, wreaking havoc, creating danger for us and for others? Teach us our personal standards that need to be in place so that we can guard our heart in Jesus. We pray in his name. Amen.